Okay, so we are going to title this Ion Formation. Does anybody remember what an ion is? Ethan. Okay, it's an atom with a charge. So ions are not neutral. Okay, we've been dealing a lot with neutral atoms. Ions are not neutral. They have a charge. The charge can be either positive or it can be negative. Okay, so ions are charged particles, essentially. So, actually, elements, let's call them charged atoms, and they can be positive or negative. Okay, so they can be charged atoms and they can be positive or negative. So let's look at sodium. How many protons does sodium have? 11. Okay, so it has 11 protons in its nucleus. And in a neutral sodium atom, how many electrons would be there? 11. Okay, so if we were going to draw the Bohr diagram for sodium, our first energy level would hold 2 electrons. The second energy level would hold 8 for a total of 10 so far. And then that one valence, or the 11th electron, would be sitting on sodium's third energy level next here. Okay, so we say that that one electron on the third energy level is its valence electron. So sodium and all the elements essentially are trying to get to be stable, right? What is the magic number in that outermost shell that makes, or that lets something achieve stability? 8. Okay, so they're trying to get to 8, just like all the noble gases with the exception of helium. Okay, they're all the elements are trying to be stable like the noble gases. So they're all trying to get to 8 valence electrons. So how many electrons does sodium lack in order to get to 8? 7, because it just has 1 valence electron. So if it were to gain 7 electrons, that would take a tremendous amount of energy. Just like if most of you, with the exception of me, were going to gain 7 pounds, okay, it'd be very easy for me, because my metabolism works that way. I'm also over 30, so that just happens. But when you're like you, okay, especially you guys that are trying to bulk up for football, what would you have to do in order to gain 7 pounds? You have to eat a lot, okay, and that's food energy. Those are calories, okay? So it takes a lot of energy to gain stuff, all right? And the atoms are no exception. So what sodium would rather do, instead of gain 7 electrons, it would rather just lose 1. Okay, it would rather just lose 1 electron. So we would say that it would lose this valence electron. So it gets kicked out. Okay, it's kicked out. And so now that's a free electron. And what happens to sodium now is, now that the third energy level is empty, it just pretty much disappears. It goes away. So now sodium looks like this. It has 8 electrons in the second energy level, which has become its outermost energy level. Okay? And since sodium started out, it had 11 protons. And 11 electrons. Okay, when that 1 electron got kicked off, right, now we have 1 more proton than we had electrons. Okay, and that gives sodium a 1 positive charge. Okay, now this is an ion. Okay, Ions are atoms that have charges. This one happens to be one positive. Okay? When we have a positively charged ion, it's called a cation. Okay? Cations are positive. The way that I like to remember this is Bearcats are positive. Okay? We all have a positive attitude, we're cations. Or you could think cats pause for Bearcats are positive, right? Bearcats are positive. Okay? So that's how ions are formed. Ions are formed either by gaining some electrons or by losing some electrons. Mr. McCone.
When an element has a negative charge, that would be an ion.
Yes, it does have a special name. It's called an anion. Let's build one. Okay? Let's look at chlorine. Okay? Let's look at chlorine. So a neutral chlorine atom has how many protons? 17. Okay, so that means that it would also have 17 electrons. So we can fit 2 electrons in the very first energy level. We can fit 8 in the second energy level. And that leaves 7 electrons to be distributed in the third energy level. So, how many electrons does chlorine need to get to 8? Just 1, yeah. It could either lose all 7 of its valence electrons and be like sodium, or it could gain 1, okay? Same concept. It's much easier to gain 1 than it is to lose 7, okay? And that's what's happening here. So essentially what chlorine does in this empty spot, okay, it grabs a free electron and puts it in there. Okay? So now, instead of having an even number of protons and electrons, chlorine has 1 extra electron, and now it has 1 more electron than it has protons, so it becomes Cl1 minus. And that is called an anion, which is a negatively charged ion. Well, there are atoms like that. Ethan just brought up a good point. He said, this is great, this is pretty easy. If they just have 1 or 2 valence electrons, or even 3, they can kick those ones off and form cations. Or if they need 1, 2, or 3 extra electrons, they can just gain them and become anions, which is an excellent point. But if you look at the elements like carbon that are in group 14, they have 4 valence electrons. So they could, if they were going to form what we call an ionic bond, which is the trading of electrons, if they were going to do that, they could either gain 4 electrons or lose 4 electrons. And that's kind of tricky. And so typically what we see in the elements that are in group 14 with 4 valence electrons is that they don't really form ionic bonds. They form what we call a molecular bond, and that's based on sharing electrons instead of actually trading them out. So we're going to talk more about that in our next unit. Yeah? Yes, because it has so many open places for an extra electron to go into. That's why carbon is oftentimes the middle of a molecule. Like if you look at a lipid, it's typically a carbon with a whole bunch of hydrogens attached to it. We're not going to treat it as neutral. We're just not really going to talk about it in the formation of ions. Yeah, good question. Really good question. Okay. All right, so that is how ions are formed. Do you guys have questions on this?